And we are back with another episode of the Pursuit of Progress podcast. As always, my name is Adam, here with my co-host Ben. Ben, what's up, Ben? How are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing great. Happy Friday, everyone, and really excited to be back here with another episode of the Pursuit of Progress and have a really exciting podcast planned today for everyone. So, super pumped.
Yeah, man, I'm really excited for this one. This is a book that we've both read. You've read it more recently than I have, but I think you're somebody that could share a few just kind of overview points of the book, along with a little background on the Carnegies.
Yeah, so the book that we're going to be discussing is How to Win Friends and Influence People, written by Dale Carnegie, really over 100 years ago, and it's considered a timeless classic. And a lot of the most successful business people, entrepreneurs in the world, Warren Buffett, for example, he read this book as an adolescent, and it was one of the most important books that he's ever read. I've also read Warren Buffett's biography, The Snowball, that came out about 25 years ago. And this was a specific book that he referenced. And the whole point of it is learning human psychology, human communication, and trying to understand how to get people to like you, how to relate to people, how to communicate effectively, how to get your message across, get your point across, how to get people engaged in what you believe in. And so a lot of this stuff is not taught in our education system like so many other things. And so really powerful examples on how to do just that. And there's six key takeaways that we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, a couple things I'll add to that before we get into these six takeaways, the six tips that they reference in the book. Number one, two things I want to talk about. First thing is that this book is short. This is not a, 800 page, behemoth of a book to get through. This book is short. You could definitely read it in a couple sittings. I bet you it's maybe 100 pages. Definitely a very easy read. So I just wanted to share that with everybody. And then also, this is not specific just to business. So, for anybody else that's listening or watching today that is not a business person, whether you're a stay-at-home parent or you're an athlete or anything at all, any person in the world can benefit from this book because it really, like you said, just really just goes more deep into human psychology and just how to be a better communicator and just relate to people and build these relationships, which is obviously more important than ever with the kind of the craziness that exists in our world today.
Mhm. One thing that I remember when I read the book here in the last year, the author recommends that you read each chapter. And then once you're done reading the chapter, you go back and read it a second time. And
Hmm.
so that's what I did. So when you do that, you're literally reading each chapter twice, and then you go to the next chapter. And the point of that is to really just let the values, the message, really sink in to your spirit and really absorb as much of it as you possibly can. So I would also encourage that for anyone that's really serious about wanting to read this book. And communication, building connections. I know that personally for me, I was one of those people when I was younger that put a label on myself that said, you know what, I'm not a great communicator. I don't have that natural charisma. And I believe that because I didn't grow up that way. I didn't come from a family of really charismatic people. And, my parents and my siblings, like none of us were really great communicators. And I had put that label on myself. What I didn't realize though, is that this is an actual skill. These are skills that you can learn, and don't put labels on yourself, number one, but also know that you can, if you aren't a great connector or a great communicator, or if you don't know how to engage folks, you can learn that. And this is a great book on how to do that.
Love that. So hopefully you guys get some little nuggets from our podcast today, but also just really highly recommend you guys, grab a copy of this book and knock it out and share with us what you feel are the most valuable, especially of these six kind of fundamentals that we're going to go through today. So let's
And
just jump right into it.
speaking of nuggets, check this out.
Oh, I like
NBA
that.
world champion Denver Nuggets.
I like that. We got game one tomorrow night of the second series on our path to the repeat.
That's right.
All right, so let's jump into this. So, you guys, the first one, and again, these aren't in any particular order of importance. This is just the same order that was shared within Dale Carnegie's book. But the first one is become genuinely interested in other people. So, we can talk about a few different things on this. Ben, do you have anything you want to share at first?
Yeah, I think the most important thing in this lesson right here, this first lesson, is the genuine part. Become genuinely interested in other people. There are so many people out there and they don't know how to have a genuine interest in something. And so you really, when you're building a connection, you have to incorporate and believe and want to have a genuine interest in someone else, their hobbies, their interests. If you're not genuine, it's going to come off across as not authentic, as a veneer, as you're trying to get something from them. And so that's kind of my biggest takeaway right here is the genuine part.
Hmm. And one thing I'll add to that is just if you're not naturally good at this, if you're not naturally charismatic, like we were talking about a second ago, one really easy way to do this is to just ask whoever you're talking to, especially if it's an uncomfortable, maybe the first time you've met this person, just ask them a question, like think of maybe a couple, questions ahead of time and just kind of put that into your tool belt for conversations moving forward with people where you kind of have that awkward silence and you just need to kind of get this conversation started. Something like, where are you from? What do you like to do? Just it could be as simple as you want to make it, but ask them those types of questions. And also, after they've given you an answer, try and dig deeper by asking a follow-up question. So rather than
Yeah.
it just being surface level, when they ask you, excuse me, let's just say, for example, I'm asking Ben, oh, where did you grow up? And he says, Applewood. And I'll say something then as a follow up question, like, oh, great. I'm not that familiar with Applewood. Where exactly is that? Or why was it that you liked living in Applewood so much? Just, if you ever have a hard time with back and forth conversation and you're just worried about what to say, just ask questions. And then whenever that question is asked, just ask a follow up and even try and do that two or three times, and that's when you get into some legitimate, kind of more deep conversation with people where you're actually showing that level of interest and your generous, your genuineness of wanting to learn more about them.
I think that's a great point, and especially if you are more introverted. Myself, for example, I'm very introverted. I've learned to be more extroverted. I consider myself a social introvert, a social introvert now. But asking the follow-up questions are so important because if you are introverted, sometimes asking those surface level questions, it can feel inauthentic. How's the weather? What were you up to this week? What's your family like? But when you ask those follow up questions, that's where you get to go a little bit deeper and get to be a little more personable with the individual that you're talking from. And that's where you can really develop a genuine interest when you ask those follow up questions.
Hmm. Love that. And then the last thing I'll say on this first one that I think is also really important is eye contact. Just outside of what you're asking them and the verbal communication that's going on, there's also visual communication that's happening. And, if you're nervous and you're looking down or you're looking away from the person, that's probably the easiest way to do the exact opposite of what we're trying to do here, which is again, show that you're genuinely interested by, not really looking like you're paying attention. That's immediately probably the worst, path you can go
Mhm.
down. So just keep that in mind too.
Yeah, that's great.
All right, well, let's jump into number two. So the second one single word, pretty easy, smile. So, Ben, I'll let you first talk on this one, and I've got a couple things to share on this one as well.
Smiling is so important. It's not about what you say, it's about how you say it. And it's about your body language. What type of energy are you putting out there? Have you ever been around someone where they might answer the question the exact same way, but they might do it in a different tone because they're not smiling? And then someone else might use the exact same words to answer the same question, but when they do it with a smile, it sends off a completely different energy. Smiles are great at breaking down barriers. They're very welcoming, and you're letting the person across from you know that, I'm here, I'm available, I'm engaged, I want to engage with you, and it's a sign of just being very open and welcome.
And everybody, has different facial structure, and some people naturally are kind of, more smiley. I don't really have that type of facial expressions where I'm oftentimes worried about this one and not being as smiling as I could be. The one thing I would say is that what you don't want to do is just look unnatural. If it's too much of a smile or just cheesy as hell, like make sure you're not just taking this one to the extreme where you're freaking the person out that you're talking to.
Yeah, and I think it's a lesson on learning how to be authentic to yourself as well. Being bold enough and brave enough to really show who you are from, an emotional side. I think sometimes we're so guarded where, especially if you're in a new environment, you may not want to let your guard down and allow yourself to kind of show people your real laugh or your real smile. Someone that I think of when you talk about smiling and laughing is Jeff Bezos. If you have ever heard him laugh, it is the most loud slash obnoxious slash funny laugh that, I mean, it is like so outspoken. And if you're in a room and you hear him laugh, or you watch a clip of him laughing, like, you'll have to go back and watch it again and again and again. But that's who he authentically is, and it's very engaging because he's being himself.
And you guys, these 6 tips don't necessarily have to be face to face. So, these are also tips that you can take if you are somebody that potentially is on the phone a lot at work and you're, prospecting and cold calling people or just, conversing with people over the phone. And this brings me up to just a phrase that I've heard over and over again when it came to just kind of direct sales and cold calling is how, the person on the other line can hear you smile over the phone. And, kind of talking on the same point of, if you
Yeah.
are smiling while you talk, it also just automatically kind of elevates the tone of your voice, and that comes across even over the telephone. So, if you're talking to somebody on the phone, try this out as well, and just see if that makes a difference.
Smile, then dial.
And I also I don't do this myself, but a lot of people just prefer also to stand up or just be, a little bit more in an active place when they are on the phone talking to people, just getting a little bit more of that energy and maybe not becoming quite as, kind of relaxed and sedentary, and having that also come
Mhm.
across over the phone. So
That's
smile, then
right.
dial.
That's right. And that brings us to point number 3, which is listening.
So yeah, number 3 is be a good listener. Encourage others to talk about themselves. Um, I'll let you start on
Mhm.
this one as well.
Yeah, I mean, have you ever been in a conversation with someone, and for me, it's my kids a lot of times, where I'm talking and I always feel like they are in a rush for me to stop talking, and a lot of times they'll just try and cut me off or interrupt me so they can start talking and
Hmm.
sharing their opinion and their thoughts, and they're not really even listening or considering to what I'm saying. And so listening and learning how to be an active listener, it really is a skill. And it's such an important part, like really listening. Like, I hear you, I'm absorbing you. One way that I like to actively listen is if we're having a conversation, for example, and you're sharing something that is really important with me. A lot of times I will start off, when I start speaking, kind of just briefly recapping those points that you shared with me, to let you know that I am, listening. I hear you. I'm going to repeat back what you said, what's important to me, to let you know and communicate that I am hearing you.
Yeah, very, very good point there. That's something that when I got certified in negotiations, that was one of the biggest things that they talked about as well. Is when you're negotiating with somebody, you want to make sure that they have a very clear understanding of what's being talked about, and by repeating it to them, you're basically just confirming what you heard and just validating that you guys are on the same page about what you're talking about. So that's a very,
Yeah,
very big
and
deal.
And to kind of follow that up, and on the business side, for example, being a mortgage banker, when I get someone sharing with me, and then I'm an active listener, and I go back over their goals, for example, what their purchase goals might be, or how much they're looking to put down. It helps me go a little bit deeper in the conversation to really understand. I know that you're saying this, but what do you mean? What is really your goal here? Now, for example, you're telling me that you want to put 20% down. Now, why is that important? Are you looking to put that much down, or is it trying to get your payment in a comfortable range? Are you looking to specifically avoid private mortgage insurance? And then it kind of opens the conversation up to where I can really understand what their goals are and what's really important to them, and it just allows a higher level of engagement and customer service.
Hmm. Yeah, and the one last topic on the silence or just sales specific to sales is the idea of, the first one that speaks loses. So basically, if you're ever in a sales type environment and you're trying to negotiate with somebody, listening, but also just providing that silence and letting them be the first to respond. It's just
Yeah.
amazing if you start having that in the back of your mind when you're talking to people, especially if you're negotiating or just talking about something important that you really want to get your way on something. Just
Mhm.
give it that extra little bit of silence, that extra bit of pause, and you'd be amazed at how often people kind of get uncomfortable by that and they just lay down their cards and um, kind of concede to whatever it is that you're talking about.
It's interesting that you mentioned that because I'm reading Robert Greene's 48 Laws of Power right now, and he talks about specifically that when you are able to control the amount of how often you speak and the frequency of your speaking, what you're really doing is holding on to your power. And when you're in a room, a lot of times, we see this in the movies where we think the person that's talking the most or sharing their ideas the most or the one that's the most vocal is kind of the leader or maybe the smartest one. But oftentimes it's not the case. It's the one who is the best listener, because when you listen, you can then identify what's going on. You can get a better understanding of who your audience is, what their motives might be, and you can kind of start to put a plan of attack together or a plan on how to orchestrate what your goal is. So yeah, very very interesting, and kind of just holding on to that personal power. By speaking less, you can actually say more.
It's great. So the next one, remember that a person's name is, to that person, the sweetest sound in any language. So I'll start on this one. So, just really
Mhm.
understanding that there is a ton of importance when it comes to addressing people by their names. That's part one. Part two, which I am really bad at, is just remembering and using somebody's name, on follow up calls, on follow up times that you're interacting with people. If you're able to really hone in that skill of just remembering people's names, and if your memory's not the best, there's other tricks, ways to, get this accomplished still. But that is something that such few people really take advantage of, but makes such an enormous impact. If you meet somebody for their first time and it's brief, being able to still somehow remember their name, and ideally on the top of that also remembering a few different things that are unique about them, and being able to right off the bat when you interact with that person for the next session, next time that you're talking to them, just bringing that up first thing you do and just kind of instantly dropping down that guard with that person and just becoming a lot closer of a relationship. So,
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%, especially when you're meeting someone for the first time, because when you remember their name and then you reference their name later in the conversation, it's it's everything about what's unspoken with that one word, which is their name. You're letting them know that you are an active listener, that they have your attention, that you are engaged in what they're saying, and you're also communicating that you're a very confident individual by having the boldness to remember their name and reference their name in dialogue. And when you say that person's name, you know, I have certain individuals in my life, like my manager at the bank, for example. He is very good at, whenever we talk, he'll kind of pause and then he'll be like, Ben, you know what? And it always, like when he references my name, it just always like grabs my attention. Like,
Hmm.
okay, he just referenced my name. Okay, and it's like this is important. And so it gives more validation to whatever you're saying and what your message is when you address that person by their name.
Love that. Yeah, and this is just something that if you guys start thinking about this, you just in the back of your mind when you're starting to interact with different people, you'll without a doubt just start picking up on this with people that are really good with this one, and you'll just really it's very clear how important this is and how much of an impact it makes. So, for myself, just not having the best memory, even if it's just having a note in your phone, writing something down immediately after you're done talking to that person, just, there's very many different ways you can be inconspicuous and still get this accomplished. And just one last thing, I think what your bank manager does, even in that initial conversation with somebody, if you're meeting with somebody for the first time, once you get their name at the beginning of the conversation, don't let that be the only time to say their name. Like you're saying, a few sentences later, maybe mention their name again when you're saying goodbye. It's great to see you, Ben. Just as many times as you can without it feeling, unnatural. But that's huge.
Yeah, makes you look confident, communicates that you are engaged, and it goes much further in making a connection. And not just that, for personal relationships, romantic relationships, this works for that, all of that stuff too.
Yep, love that. All right, so let's go into number 5. So number 5 is talk in terms of the other person's interests. So basically, this is a one that I think out of all 6 is the one that I had a little bit difficulty just really comprehending as well as some of the others. But it's just really just referring to just how you need to tailor your conversations to topics that are interesting to whoever it is that you're interacting with. So, if you're meeting a 70-year-old woman for the first time, don't talk about how the Nuggets just won their game and are going to the next round in the playoffs. I mean, yeah, that might be relevant to her, but again, just asking questions, finding things that are interesting to them, and then really leaning into those topics to make them feel more comfortable from their side and feel more open to communicating back to you.
Mhm.
The only other thing
Yeah,
I'd add,
that's right. And
sorry, Ben, go ahead.
I'm sorry. What I was going to say is the book actually gives an example in this where an older man who is coming over on a date to pick up his date. She's getting ready, and her son is in the room, and the son is he's probably 7 or 8 years old. He's playing with his toys, and one of the toys is a boat. And so the man who is there for the woman and the date engages the son and they have a conversation. And the only thing that he talks to him for that 10 or 15 minutes while they're waiting is boats. And the story in the book is how the son walks away just so enthralled and engaged. And he asks him years later about boats. And the man is like, well, I have no interest in boats. I'm not interested in boats at all, but you are. And that's why it's important to me, is because it was important to you. It's something that you're interested in. And that's why I started the conversation off. And it goes back again to just being authentic. If you are genuinely interested in someone else's interests, that's going to mean a lot more than you trying to make some, insincere conversation, whether it's personal or business.
Mm-hmm. Yep, very well said. All right, guys, and then the sixth and final, make the other person feel important and do it sincerely. So this is just about acknowledging the value and importance of others. So just really, I think this one kind of sums up all of the other 5. I don't think it has too many specific talking points, at least on my end, but just really being genuine and making sure that you're complimenting the person just to make them feel that level of importance, regardless of what relationship you have with that person, even if it's somebody that's an equal to you. Maybe it's a somebody that you're on a sales call with that maybe you're kind of in a position where you're trying to sell them something, or vice versa. Just making sure that you're very complimentary and just really showing that sincere value that you have in the other person.
Yeah, absolutely. For the customers that I work with, I let them know it is such a privilege for me to get the opportunity to work with you. I put that in writing. I tell them that face to face when I go to a closing. And I really believe that. When I speak with my kids, I let them know, we don't have to agree on this. Your feelings, though, are important to me. Even if we don't see eye to eye, if we don't agree on this, that's okay. You're still allowed to be upset, or you're still allowed to be happy, or you're still allowed to be excited for you. Even if I'm not excited, or I might be mad about this, but if you're happy, you are still able to validate yourself. But how we go about communicating that is also what's important. So I always just want to, tell my kids, I'm thankful for your time. I tell my customers that. um, and just having a kind of a spirit of gratitude. I think just like learning that, how to be thankful, how to recognize others, make others feel appreciated. And it's not about, what people can do for me. How can I impact other people, in my personal sphere, professional sphere, and then with my family?
For somebody that's maybe in a managerial role, I know that in my past career, just with my entrepreneurial business that I had before with a lot of employees, anytime I had like a one-on-one, kind of like a quarterly meeting with somebody, or just like
Mhm.
a time where I knew I was going to see somebody and I had a little bit of time ahead of time to prep before seeing them. Even just in my
Yeah.
mind, driving over to meet them, just thinking of, one or two things about that person that I just really admire, that I really think is unique and special in some sense, regardless of how big or small it is. It could be something as simple as they always are dressed really nicely, or they seem like they go on a lot of really cool vacations and trips, and they're very well traveled. Whatever it is, you can think of pretty much something for everybody if you've at least had a few minutes with that person in a different conversation prior to this one. But just being able to kind of have this number six final one, I think this is a good one to just kind of have in your head prior to seeing somebody if you are meeting them for a second or a follow up time, and just being kind of ready to go on this one.
Yeah. And I certainly agree with you. And when you look at all six of these together, are any of them really impossible? Learn how to become genuinely interested, learn how to smile, remember a person's name, be an active listener, speak in terms of the other person's interest. No, they're not. They're very reasonable. But when you develop these habits and you turn them into skills, I'm telling you right now, it can be absolutely life changing for how you develop your relationships, how you communicate, and the impact that you have on others. So don't just learn what these are, turn them into habits and then develop them into skills.
And if it's hard to remember all six of these, even just have this list of six printed out. We'll link down below, if you guys are watching this on YouTube, in the show notes. If you guys are listening on podcast, just look up Dale Carnegie's six tips on how to win friends and influence people. And just if you have this printed out somewhere, just pick one or two. Maybe you just go down the list. Pick one a week or one a day, and just have that one be your priority, and just focusing on doing that, as much as you possibly can that day. And like Ben's saying, developing that habit where, after doing this for a day or two on each of these, it's just going to become a little bit easier to do, a little bit more just natural without even having to think about it.
Mhm. That's great.
Cool, guys. Well, we're finishing this one up exactly at 30 minutes. So hopefully, we provided a ton of value for you in that short period of time. If you guys haven't, please make sure you are hitting that like and subscribe button if you're watching this on YouTube. And if you're listening to us on podcast, please just share it with a friend. That's the best way we can grow our audience and hopefully continue to just make this podcast better and better as time goes on.
And what episode is this, Adam, for the podcast?
This is 21.
And there's some significance about getting to 22 or 23, isn't there?
Yeah, I think one of our buddies, Darwin from high school, I think he mentioned to us that like 95% of, and again, don't quote me on this, but it was something over 90% of podcasts don't make it to, I think, 25 episodes. So we're we're
Okay.
we're rounding the corner here.
We're closing in. Hey, well, you know what? I appreciate your time. Great message today. Thank you for suggesting this. I'm smiling. I have warm body language. I'm listening to what you said, And but yeah, really appreciate you, all of the efforts that you do, and the work in getting this together. And excited for our audience, and let's keep building.
Sounds great. Hope you guys all have a great rest of your day. We'll catch you next week on another episode of
The pursuit of progress.
See you guys.